Hey, welcome to this episode of the Movement Mentality Podcast. You know who I am. I have my good friend and colleague and peer, Colleen, here. And I'm just so looking forward to hearing about her life journey, her expertise. She emailed me and told me about some really unique things that she can share with you guys. And I thought, okay, yeah, let's have her on the podcast. So, Colleen, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Congratulations on the show. And I'm really happy that you've had me on. Thanks, Missy.
You're so welcome. And thank you. It was about 5 years in the making of me wanting to start a podcast.
Yeah.
But wanting to do something is very different than pulling the trigger and taking action. So
Can I ask what made you do it now?
Yeah, it was the end of last winter, right? So it's only March right now, but a couple months ago, I had this vision. I had kept saying year after year, I'm going to start this podcast in my New Year's resolutions. I'm starting my podcast next year. I'm starting my podcast next year. And it was either October or November of 2024. And I was just sitting there going, it's the end again. And I'm not going to start the podcast. And I just blurted out an email out of nowhere. My girlfriend, Amber Lilystrom, her husband does her podcast. And I just shot an email out and was like, I want to start a podcast. Thank you. Bye. Like,
and then it's done. Once you put it out there, you have to follow through.
I put it out. Yeah. I took that action and he wrote me back. He's like, here's how this works. You pay me money. I do this. and I was just like, okay. It felt very overwhelming because I wasn't mentally prepared, but it's actually not that hard. It's actually, of course, once you do something, you're like, wow, that wasn't that bad. But for 5 years, I was making it to be something so significant and huge. And it's like, just start a podcast. Then you tell people you have a podcast and that's the end of it. Like, it's not that big of a deal.
And I think it's one of those lessons as an entrepreneur, if you always wait for the perfect moment and everything to be in place, you never move. And I think both of us have just done that thing where, okay, I'm just going to go and then I'll figure it out, right? Because otherwise you're just stuck.
You have to. I'm learning that lesson really big right now because I just started a business coaching program, Beta Group, and it's something I really, 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 really wanted to do. Didn't really know how to do it, and I still don't, and we're doing it. And
I love it.
Great, and it's amazing. So
they're very lucky to have you.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. So where do you live? Tell us about you, and we are going to do that, that super quick bio just to get a lens from which to listen to you from and just hear a little bit about your story.
Sure. So I'm Canadian. I live in Montreal. And I started my career in exercise science. So my degree is in exercise science with a specialization in athletic therapy. So here, that means you can either work on the field with teams or in a clinic. I did a bit of both. And very soon after getting my degree, I also became a Pilates instructor, which was a really interesting story that I hope we get into. And I started the osteopathy school. So here, an osteopath is not a medical doctor, it's a manual practice. And at the time, it was a 5-year post-grad program. So I went into that right after athletic therapy. And so my clientele evolved. Originally, for the first several years, I was really working with mostly athletes. And then as I got my osteopathy degree, people just start to send you those more complicated chronic cases. And it was never my goal to be a chronic pain specialist, but by nature of my own story, for one, but also the people that I started seeing, I just kind of got thrown into it and then became super interested in those really complicated cases. The ones that most people say, I don't even want to try. I love trying to figure it out. It's like a puzzle that I want to get to the bottom of. So all of that. And in there, I also became certified as a yoga instructor and somatics as well. And I've got a real mishmash. I love to learn. So I'm constantly evolving. that. We could sit here for 20 minutes talking about the courses, but that would be really boring. So in a nutshell, absolutely. I do a lot of everything. So manual therapy and movement are my main things, and complex chronic pain is my specialty.
Okay, awesome. And so what does your schedule look like these days? Is this in person? Is it online?
So it's a little bit of
Hybrid?
both. So I'm 3 days a week in the clinic doing hands-on osteopathy, and then all the other days. So it really, I actually have listened to you quite a few times. I love the way you've mapped out those boundaries for yourself. Still figuring that out because the online business part is the rest of the week. And if I don't set myself those boundaries, I'm just doing it every waking moment, right? So I'm getting better and better, but I haven't fully mastered the way that you seem to have 3 p.m., you're cutting it off. I'm still figuring it out, but I'm trying at least like 7 p.m. That's it. I'm not going to answer anything or look at anything that has to do with the online stuff. When it comes to a launch or whatever, it's hard to stick to that, but I'm trying more and more to get there because otherwise it's all you do, right?
Yeah. Well, a launch is different. I don't have strict boundaries during that time. Well, that's a lie. I have strict boundaries during that time. They're just different boundaries,
They're
right?
wider boundaries.
They're wider but yeah, they're still strict. But yeah, they're not like this cutoff. It's like, hey, for these 5 days,
Yeah.
this is what I'm doing. The phone
Yeah.
is stuck to my face. Um, but okay, interesting. So that I when I was introducing you just now, I thought, oh my goodness, am I supposed to say Dr. Colleen? And I
No.
totally messed that up because in the States, I think
It
it
would be.
is,
Yes.
right? So,
Yeah.
okay, so that is why I was a little bit confused. I was like, "Oh my gosh, this didn't mean to be disrespectful or insulting."
Even if I
But
had that
okay,
title, I wouldn't want you to call me doctor. Colleen is good.
yeah, okay, yeah. So, okay, so you go through all of this and then you have your own stuff that you're dealing with. So, that must be an interesting dynamic or relationship that you have with your body, your brain, your athletes because you have an intimate connection to probably everything they're saying.
Yeah, it's been
And
fascinating because, you know, all the amazing mentors, teachers, courses, workshops, books, all the things I've taken and read and done taught me so much. No question about it. I wouldn't trade any of it. I could not have learned what I've learned without living what I've lived. Do you know what I mean? Like you just don't, you can't fully understand what it's like to live in pain 24/7 unless you're living in pain 24/7. So I would say that the first half of my career, even though I saw a lot of people who were living in chronic pain and I really believed that I understood, I really, really did. It wasn't until so I had a spinal cord compression injury. And it was only when I was really from that point that I went, oh, okay, this is like it never stops kind of thing. We're talking 24/7, every minute of the day. That's not the same as having a 10 on 10 pain when you break something and then it's down to a 5 in 2 weeks and it's down to a 3 in 4. You know what I mean? So it was a very good learning curve. I thought I was a compassionate person before, and I think I was, but I'm a whole different kind of compassionate now that I kind of more get it. And it's been really interesting from a professional standpoint. So I've had 3 spine surgeries in my life. My first one was on my 22nd birthday. I was quite young. And it was 2 completely different experiences. Back then, so I'm a dancer, is what my sport was. So super flexible, very strong. I could always do whatever I wanted with my body. And I only understand now that when people are taking your class and they're saying like the stretching hurts, I never got that because for me stretching just always felt good. Like, yeah, you feel it, but I loved that feeling. And I never understood when people would say that moving their bodies in a certain way like really hurt them and they didn't want to do it. I didn't get it. So when I was going through, I guess from ages 17 to 22, I had really bad back pain with neuropathic pain down one leg. But every doctor I went to did the same 2 tests. They asked me to do a forward fold, and I could flatten my torso on my thighs without thinking about it. And I did that the day of my surgery as well. And they did a straight leg raise. And straight leg raise traditionally is only considered positive if it's between certain degrees. But I could put my leg here, and this is where my straight leg raise was positive, but that wasn't considered at the time. So for 5 years, they just kept saying, it's all in your head. Told my parents to take me to a psychiatrist, like the whole thing, right? Then after 3 years, it ended up down both legs. I finally just couldn't take it anymore. I went to a neighbor who was a nurse, and she reached out to an ortho who was a friend and said, can you just image her? Let's see if something's going on. And at the time, they did a myelogram. And then all of a sudden, they wanted to rush me into surgery. You're going to be paralyzed if you move the wrong way. We need to get you in right away. So it was really interesting to see that it went from not listening, not believing what I was living to, oh my God, you're in such a dire state. We need to operate right now. It was really fascinating to live both of those, you know? Then I had the surgery. It was great. It helped tremendously. Loved my surgeon. He was awesome. And when I was recovering, I
Wait,
got
so
strong. Yeah.
what was happening with your spine?
Okay, sorry. So I had two disc
So,
herniations and severe spinal
oh,
stenosis, but the disc herniations were
oh,
lateral but also posterior. So between those posterior discs and the spinal stenosis, there was a lot of compression on the actual cord. So I even
got
ended
it.
up, losing control of the bladder and all of that. So in the surgery, after the surgery, I got my strength back pretty quick, but I never felt like I was at the same level that I was before. But I was quite functional. I had pain if I sat too much or stood too much, but I could always manage it with exercise. And it was during that time that I stumbled upon Pilates. So at the time, nobody knew what Pilates was. There was one studio in Montreal. She had one reformer, two Cadillacs in this tiny little apartment. And she had the old fashioned kind that were metal with the leather straps. So it looked like torture chambers. And I had just graduated from athletic therapy. And a friend of mine had met this person, Anne McMillan, who gave her card and said, I'm looking for a physio who has a background in dance. And I'm like, I need a job. I'm an AT who has a background in dance. I don't know what Pilates is, but let me find out. And we didn't have like the internet to look it up at that, but it's such a weird that it was that long ago that we couldn't even figure out what it was on the online. So I just went for the interview, got the job, and then spent the next year doing a mentorship to become a Pilates instructor. And it was while doing that that I started to see, my pain is getting better and better. And now I'm stronger than I've ever been. And I started to see, okay, Pilates is not just this thing for fitness, it's an amazing rehab tool. So that then branched into a whole bunch of other things.
I have chills all over my
Yeah, it was
body.
really cool.
Wow. So what age are you at this point?
So I had my surgery when I was 22. So I must have been 23, 24, I guess, at that time. I think, yeah.
Okay. So
So
yeah,
then,
either 24 or 25 by the time you're done with the mentorship.
yeah, I think so. Must have been a little younger, probably more like 23, I think.
Okay.
Yeah. And then I was working as an athletic therapist at a sports medicine clinic, and they were about to expand and they wanted to create a multidisciplinary team with a whole bunch of other professionals and approaches and whatnot. So I said, oh, you should include Pilates, but nobody knew what Pilates was. So I tried to describe it. And have you done Pilates?
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to describe, right? You kind of have to experience it.
Just
So I
hard,
tried to describe
period.
it. And I suggested they buy a reformer, have it in this new clinic, and they said, we're not quite there. We're not ready to do that. And so I had just graduated a year before, and I went, you know what? I'll buy the reformer. I'll rent a little corner from the clinic, and I'll run that as my business. And they said yes. So I had no money, and I invested. It was $4,500 US, which in Canadian is about 6,500. And I was so excited. I was so proud to purchase this and put it in this little corner. And it was just the best feeling. And then I went, what the hell have I done? What now? I knew nothing about business. I knew nothing about marketing. I wasn't ready for it all, but it was an opportunity that I couldn't say no to. So because I was new at the clinic, I didn't have a full schedule. Every spare minute I had, whether it was a 2-minute break or a 2-hour break, I jumped on the reformer and I would just use it. So all the therapists and all of their patients and all the doctors were seeing it. All the patients started to ask, what is that? I want to try it. And I never ended up having to do any marketing. It was just all through word of mouth and people seeing how cool this looked that they all wanted to try it. So their therapists started to send them to me, and I gave a free session to all the therapists and all the doctors, and it just sort of organically went from there, which was kind of fun.
And you're so young at
So
this
young.
point.
Yeah.
Like running a entrepreneurial little
I mean, it was a little
I,
business, but
I mean,
it
it's
was my
not
start.
little actually. It's like a full grown woman's business to this day. Like I have a reformer and I run this out of my basement or whatever. Like,
Yeah. It's one of those
wow.
life decisions that it really changed the trajectory. I mean, I always thought that I would become a clinic owner at some point, but I never thought it would be my first year out of school, that's for sure.
No,
But I'm so glad that
wow.
I did. Yeah, it was pretty cool.
Oh my goodness, that is wild. Okay, so I have so
I
many
see
thoughts
your
and
wheels turning.
questions now. Yeah, I'm like, because I, how old are you now?
So I remember it was 1997 when I put the reformer in that clinic.
Okay, I can't do
I can't
math.
even think right now how old I was. 27. I must have been 27.
Everyone, I'm pulling out a calculator.
Yeah, I was 27. That's it.
So
27.
27. Okay, so 2025 minus 1997. 28.
28 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Oh, so
I must have
28
been
years ago. Got it.
27 and it was 28 years ago. Does that make sense? Yes, it does.
Yeah, okay. So, wow. Okay, so that's your journey into this whole thing. And then what happens?
So I was also at the time recovering from this surgery, and I was seeing my athletic therapy mentor, Paul Evans. He was studying osteopathy at the time. He was near the end of his schooling. And I thought, when you're young and you're learning, you think you know everything. And of course, now we know the more you learn, the more you realize you don't know. But back then, I was so fascinated by everything we had learned in school, and I thought I had all the tools. And then I went to see him as a patient, and he was doing all these things that I had not learned. And when I would ask him questions about the why and the how, he would explain the anatomy in terms of how it was all interconnected. Whereas in school, I had learned the parts. Here's the upper extremity, here's the lower extremity, here are the viscera, blah, 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 blah. In osteopathy, it's not like that. You interconnect. How do all the systems connect with each other? How does all the anatomy connect with each other? And I was just like, oh, I need more of this. So the second I graduated, I enrolled in osteopathy, and it was the best decision. I absolutely love it.
So you still have this Pilates corner.
Yes, I still had the Pilates corner. So over the years, I went from that little corner to I moved into a small clinic space with another. No, sorry, I first moved it into my apartment. Then I found a small clinic space. Then I bought a Cadillac. Then I moved a little bit bigger, and I had two reformers in a Cadillac. And then I finally realized the vision that I had had, and it was three osteopaths, and we had a studio space to be able to run group classes. And I had my reformer, two reformers, a Cadillac, a chair, a barrel, and all the props. And that was just like, that was my dream come
Mm.
true. And it was
Oh.
amazing for, I think, only 2 years. And then I got that spinal cord compression injury and was literally could not move and had to shut everything down like from the floor. I couldn't even say goodbye to my staff or my clients or anything. It was like cutting off a limb. It was crazy.
So you couldn't delegate that at all because you like
You know,
ran it?
At the time, I was in such survival mode, like really just getting through every moment. Maybe I could have done it differently. I couldn't even process at the
You
time,
could.
So yeah,
Wow. So what happened?
it's such a strange. So that first surgery that I had when I was
Yeah.
22. So typical to that sort of injury, they did the discectomy at the two levels. They did bilateral laminectomy at the two levels, but they also did a spinectomy where they take the spinous process away.
Mm.
Now, when they do that, they put a metal cage so that you have something covering the spinal cord. But at the time, they didn't do that. So my spinal cord was just left open. Like it was just, so if I wore a belt or jeans, my legs would go numb because it was pressing right on the spinal cord. Other than that, I never had any issues. It was fine. But so now fast forward 20 years, and I would like to say that it was this crazy injury from something really fun that I was doing, but it was a really bad stomach flu. And I was projectile vomiting for as long as I had something to vomit. And I guess just the pressure from being round and vomiting so much, it blew the scar tissue that had formed like a fake arch to protect the spinal cord. So then imagine, as you know, our vertebrae move, right? They're always moving. They have rotation, but they're a perfect circle, really. So when they move, it's fine. It's not the end of the world. We'll feel it a little bit, but it's not the end of the world. But now, because my vertebrae was like a half circle, when it would rotate a little bit, it would press right on the cauda equina. And I cannot even describe to you what that would feel like. I had 8 canes at the time. I had 2 on my top floor, 2 on the main floor, 2 at the office, and 2 in my car, because when this would happen, I wouldn't be able to walk. So I would have to lean and just drag myself until I could get somewhere to get in a recovery position. So yeah, that's how it happened. It was very, very boring story, but that's what it was.
I mean, it's not. It actually makes all the sense,
It does
like
make
your
sense anatomically.
inflection, your
High
vomiting. I mean,
pressure, Valsalva over and
posterior's
over and over.
open, exposed.
Yeah,
It makes all the sense. So,
yeah.
so that's 20 years
So that was
later.
20 years later, exactly. So
Mm.
that was back in 2012.
So,
So, yep, go for it.
wow. So what's going on in your mind at that time?
That's a great question. It was so interesting, Missy, being a mover, like my whole life, dance, diving, gymnastics, figure skating. Like I always went into those artistic sports. And as you can see now, I don't just talk with my hands. People have always told me, you dance when you talk. Like I use my whole body when I talk. It's just always, I'm such a mover. I studied movement. All my professions, have always been about movement. And here I was, and the only thing I could move was my hands and fingers for weeks at a time. And it's like I didn't know who I was. I was like, well, I don't think I have an identity if I'm not able to move, you know? And then in between those episodes of only being able to move my hands, I would then be able to move. I could walk. Sometimes I would need a walker, sometimes canes, sometimes not. But if you can picture, when we walk, our pelvis goes side to side. And if you picture like a model on the runway, they kind of exaggerate that. I just didn't have that. It was like instead of a spine, I had this steel rod and I had none of that movement. So I was so stiff. And I just remember like not recognizing who I was without having movement. And I remember one day getting out of my car in the parking lot of a grocery store, and all of a sudden I was able to move my pelvis that way. And I just like, boom, boom. I exaggerated so much because it felt so good to have it again. I must have looked ridiculous, but I was living my best life, like swinging my hips side to side. But yeah, to go back, I think so. Two things realization there. One was the biggest one was, you know what, you're more than just what you do, and you're more than just what you teach. And so it was a big time of self discovery because it was 2 years before I had surgery for that. So I was dealing with that for 2 years, and I learned a lot about myself, tons. But I also had a moment when I was there, only able to move my hands, where it's like I could picture how it would be if it was happening to somebody else. And for when it was myself, I wasn't afraid because I understood the anatomy of what was happening. And I knew that it was okay to try to move whatever I could. And slowly over time, I then included my elbows and then eventually my shoulders. And I built on it. And I knew that that was okay to do. And then at some point, about 2 weeks in, I was picturing it as though someone else was going through it. And I felt this like paralyzing fear. And I realized this is what most people would feel because they don't know their bodies. Like, it's wild to me that we teach people how to change a tire and change their oil, but they have no idea how these bodies we live in work. And so it became my mission to create something that would teach people about their bodies. And if you got into a situation that was scary with your body, you would have the tools to figure it out. So that was the birth of what is now my Dare to Heal program. But it was 8 years before I was able to actually sit at a computer and create it. And I launched it back in 2019 or 2020. So I was very, very proud to finally do that. And it has done what I hoped it would do, that people who used to come and see me very regularly for osteopathy because any little something they felt they had to come to somebody to fix it. And now they've taken this program and they know that they've got the tools, and they rarely reach out to, which I know is a terrible business model, but it's exactly what I wanted. That come and see me if you want to, but I don't want you to need me. It's your body. I want you to understand it. When we feel pain, it's because your body's trying to talk to you. And I want everybody on this planet to have the tools to figure out what your body's trying to tell you and work with it as a partner. So those are my two biggest realizations from that.
Mm. So you launched that in 2019-ish.
Must have been
So
2020.
2020. Okay. So I'm thinking because there are a lot of people who have chronic pain and don't know their bodies and feel very fearful. It doesn't even have to be chronic, actually. They
Absolutely.
just have pain and they're terrified. I mean,
Yeah.
one of my best guy friends, I remember we were traveling and he hurt his knee. I mean, he was spiraling out of control with his thoughts and going crazy. And we were in a golf cart, oddly, in Mexico. But
One does.
yeah, as a very normal day. And I remember being like, thinking to myself, wow, this person really doesn't understand how this works.
Yeah.
And they shouldn't. Why
Yeah.
would they?
Why
It's
would
not
they?
their fault. But so I was like, okay. Instead of judging or like whatever, I was able to say, hey, your first injury is always the scariest. Always, especially if it's serious and especially if it takes you out.
Yeah.
And just verbally educating him on what happens when you get an injury, and because it was his knee, it was his first big injury, he couldn't walk, and it was a jujitsu thing. And he, by the time we were done driving on the golf cart, he was like, that was really helpful, thank you.
That's awesome.
And then he got injured again and he remembered what I had said years before, and then his next injury he remembers, he's like, my next injuries weren't as bad as that first one.
Oh,
And
that
you
makes me
know
so happy to hear
I
that.
right? And I'm like, oh,
Like,
and that's how it works. That
yeah,
first one is life altering
you think it's the
because
end of the
you
world and you're
don't
never going to be better.
understand. Yeah. And then in my mind, I'm telling, like, in my mind, I don't say this, but I'm like, it's just a knee.
Yeah.
Like, we are good. There are very clear cut strategies to
Yeah.
take care of this, timelines, all the things. But in this person's mind, they don't know what to do. They've never felt this before. Da da da. So they're listening now, right? These
Yeah.
people with acute or chronic and everything in between types of pain. So what do you want to say to them? What do they need to know? What mantras do you have, or what's your message to this specific experience?
So I think it's two things. I think the biggest thing to understand is, so when we feel pain, we tend to want to fight it, and we think of it as an enemy that's come in and invaded us. But pain is actually produced by your own nervous system as a way to get your attention. So I think of it, what if it was your best girlfriend and you're out one night and you meet a guy and you're thinking, I'm going to go home with this guy. And your girlfriend's like, no, you're not. And she gets really loud and in your face because she's like, this is not okay for you to do. You're going to stop that right now. But you're still wanting to. So she's got to get bigger and louder to like say, no, no, this is not happening. You would say, you're so right, and thank you so much. But when our body does that, we feel it as a sensation of pain. It doesn't feel good. So our instinct is to hate it and to fight it. But the more we're in that headspace, we're in our stress response. And when we're in our stress response, that is never the place that we're going to heal from. So I want people to understand that when you feel a new sensation, even if it's not pain, any new sensation can be scary. Any new sensation is like your own body, your very best friend, your best protector, bodyguard, or whatever you want to call it, tapping you on the shoulder and saying, hey, Missy, I'm trying to tell you something. I'm not going to give you all the details though. I want you to figure it out, but I'm letting you know that there's something that needs your attention. So to me, when people get a new sensation, pain or otherwise, pause. Just take a moment, take a beat, ground into your feet, tune into your breath, and then try to figure out, what's my body trying to tell me? Have I been sleeping okay? Have I been eating inflammatory foods, or am I getting like good nutrition? Am I in happy, healthy relationships? Do I hate my job or do I love going to work? Like all of those things and so many more are part of the story, not just your actual physical body. So yes, if you just fell down and you felt something pop in your knee and now your knee hurts, that's a different story, right? Okay, you need to get your knee looked at. But if it's something that you wake up one day and out of the blue you can't move because your back feels locked, there's a reason why your body's slowing you down. Have you not been honoring your boundaries? Have you not been taking any time for you? Like, look at all the big story and figure out, what is my body trying to tell me? So that's one thing. And then the second part is, okay, how can I give my body what it's asking for? And that's where it's a little trickier. It's a little more nuanced. And that's where I think people like you and I can help to teach people some tools that, okay, when I find myself in that position, I've got the different things that I can try, and it's never one recipe. You have to do a bit of trial and error and figure it out and be open and curious instead of being fearful. Because fearful just sets us into that stress response, which means higher protection from the nervous system, which means it's going to produce more pain and inflammation. If instead we come from it from this place of curiosity, like, all of a sudden my elbow's hurting and I have done nothing. Well, isn't that interesting? Why might that be? You're in a completely different nervous system state, and now you're greeting it with, tell me more, instead of, and shutting everything down. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. I love that. Well, isn't that interesting?
Isn't
Tell
that
me more.
interesting?
That is so interesting. So if someone listening they're hearing this, right? And they're going, okay, I'm freaking out. I have a new sensation, pain or otherwise. Now what? I just heard this brilliant woman, Colleen, say, do this, do that, do that. But how do they do it? Do they write it down? Do they call? So what are the logistical steps for
Hmm.
someone to go from freak out to tell me more? That was interesting. Like, how do we do this? Like a 5-step type of process.
It's a great question. I wish it were as simple as to say that everybody should do that same 5-step process, but you know as well
Mhm.
as I do that everybody's situation is so unique. So I will give a process, but everybody listening know that you might need to tailor it to your own unique situation, right? So first, yes, if it's you need to rule out that it's not something medical. Always you need to do that. So I'm talking about situations where we've done our due diligence and we know it's not something medical that needs an intervention, right? Then pause and notice, what story is your system telling you? And actually, can I share a story and then we'll come back to the steps, because it's such a great example of how this can work. So it's an example of the stories that we create, but it's also, for any of the practitioners listening, a really great example of how important the words we choose are. Because something that's really obvious to us, not so obvious to someone who doesn't know the anatomy. So I have a client recently who fractured her humerus in 3 places. One of the fractures was quite high up, very close to the head of the humerus. So the doctor was explaining to her that she was at risk of avascular necrosis because the artery is there, and if the blood flow does not get to the head, she would be at risk. So I happened to see her for osteopathy a couple of hours later, and I know her personally. And she came in and she was in such an anxious state. And I know she's anxious about the injury, but it was bigger than that. So I was kind of probing and saying, what's going on? Like, you seem not okay. And she said, I just saw the doctor. And she said, Colleen, I'm at risk of a stroke. And I said, because of your humerus fracture? And she said, yes. I said, can you take me through that? Like, what happened? So she explained what the doctor said. And then I realized she doesn't know what the head of the humerus. When she heard you may not be getting blood flow to your head, she thought it meant she's not getting blood flow to her brain. And so she was at risk of a stroke. So she was walking like she was afraid to move. Like, can you imagine? Like, it makes me want to cry. And thank goodness she
She
happened to
thought
have
her
an appointment.
head.
She thought it was her head. And the doctor did nothing wrong. He said it right. But the story that her mind created around the facts that she heard were completely different than what was actually happening. And so that's so often the case, that the story we create is much worse than what's actually happening. And back pain is a perfect example. If you've ever been someone, and there's so many people on the planet who have their back locks on them. I do this in quotations because your back doesn't really lock, it just feels like it's locked, right? So if you've ever had that experience before, and now you have a bit of sensation in your back, you remember, oh my God, the last time this happened, I was in bed for 5 days. I couldn't go to work. I needed to rely on other people to do my groceries and make my meals. I couldn't play with my kids, and on it goes, right? Where maybe it was just that you tweaked a muscle and it was just a little thing. But now the story that your mind is creating, it's not you consciously. Unconsciously, your mind remembers the bad thing. And because we want our species to survive, we remember the bad things and we highlight the bad things so that if it was that someone had a gun to your head and you see a gun again, you know, I'm going to run away from that gun. But when it comes to back pain, you don't need to go to that fearful place. The best thing to get out of a back episode is to breathe and to move a little bit and then to move a little bit more and then to move a little bit more. But when we go into that fear place, what do? We lock it all down. And then our muscles become more tight. We create more inflammation and we get more stuck, you know? So that story, I think I lost track of my points, but recognizing the story that your mind has created is one step. And then ask yourself, is it true? Because 9 times out of 10, it's not true. And then if it isn't true, let it know what the reality actually is. You know, oh, okay, I have back pain again. I'm not the same person I was when I had it 6 years ago. I didn't fall. I wasn't hit by anything, so it's not that bad. I got better last time. I'm going to get better this time. And now I have tools because I worked with Missy or Colleen, so I can use the breath and I can use some of my neuro tools and I could use the opposite joints and all the things. So it's going to be okay. It sucks right now, but it's going to be fine. And just changing that story calms the nervous system down. And when we calm the nervous system down, there's less protection, which means less inflammation and less pain. Is that helpful?
Yes, it leaves me feeling, well, that's doable.
It is doable.
That's how I feel. Well, that's doable.
And
You know, and
obviously, it's
we
more doable when you're not in the crisis, of course.
yeah,
It's harder
yes.
when you're in it. And then the
It
curiosity
is
piece, be
hard.
curious enough, like when I couldn't move my whole spine, I couldn't move my head, I couldn't move my legs or my feet, I could move my fingers, I could move my hands. So I have a saying, work with what's working. We always get fixated on, oh, my back is sore and I can't move. And that's all we're thinking about. Well, I can't move my back, so I can't do anything. Well, actually, can you still move your arm? Can you still move your head? Can you circle your feet? And so work with what's already working. That teaches your nervous system that, oh, I actually like movement. And then it backs off the protection. And then all of a sudden you can find, ah, now I can move my ribs a little bit. Look at that. Oh, now I can move my pelvis a little bit. And it spirals in the good way, you know? When we
Yeah, it's
prove
so
to our system that we
powerful.
can move, it wants to move more.
Yes, so powerful. Work with what's working.
Work with
I've
what's
never
working.
heard that. Yeah, you see someone with a broken ankle or fracture, whatever, bruised, um, and it's like you could just be like, I can't do anything now.
Yep. I can't
You
do
have
yoga. I
a
broke my foot.
I can't
You
do
can
anything.
absolutely still do yoga.
Yes, it's like you have a whole rest of your body, the whole rest of it, but it is hard because it's depressing.
It is.
It's super depressing and you get super frustrated and my body's not doing what it should. I can't trust my body. You're a prisoner to your body. I have a bad knee. I have a bad, it's really easy to go to those dark places. So it's very powerful to go, okay, pause, work with what's working, tell me more. That's interesting. It's cool how you've come up with your ways because your oh, that's interesting. Tell me more. Is I usually tell people to say, oh, thank you for sharing.
Oh, I like that. Thank you for
Just
sharing.
pause and say
That's
thank you
good.
for sharing because the signal is appropriate.
Yes.
It's so I'm so grateful I got the signal. Thank you
Yes.
for sharing. And my example is I say, hey, my sister's had brain surgery. She could put her hand on a stove, hot.
Not feel it.
That's not good.
No.
That means there's a problem, right? We don't want that. We want the brain to go, ow, that didn't feel good or new sensation. So it's a gratitude moment, actually, in my opinion.
I
Thank you
agree.
so much for working appropriately and notifying me. Like the girlfriend,
Yeah,
don't
yeah.
go home with
Flag you
him.
down.
Like, hello, excuse me?
By
Just
the way.
no, yeah, no, thank you. Um, It's so funny because we start the podcast and I'm like, we're going to try not to talk about approach and techniques, but it's probably going to come out anyways because we are who we are. So here we are. We're older, we're wiser, we're more experienced. We still have a lot to learn, of course. What would you say to what I'm hearing, right, is a movement professional or any professional really, but specifically a movement professional in pain, helping people with pain. This seems to be something you can really make a difference for people that are in that situation.
Yeah.
So, what is something you would say to your younger self or this younger generation of, because there are a lot of pain experts that are in pain.
Yeah.
There's a lot.
Yeah.
And it might be this like hidden universe, this hidden population of people that no one wants to talk about, but it's very real.
It is.
You talk to a nurse for 5 minutes, you're going to hear about her pain within that 5 minutes. Every nurse I know is like, my back hurts, my this hurts. And I ask them, well, how do you move the patients? And they're like, they don't teach us anything. They just say, move them.
Oh,
And I'm
that's
like,
terrible.
no one teaches you how to use your body and leverage systems. No
Wow.
training. Just move the patient from that to that, 2 feet planted, bend over,
Oh.
rather than, no one taught you, even if you just lunged with one leg, that
Yeah.
would be a little bit more helpful. Never heard that, and
Wow.
I'm just like, okay, so you're helping people in pain all day
No
long
kidding, they're
and
in
you're
pain.
suffering. Random, but I got invited to this sonographer Facebook group. It's like an ultrasound type of person.
Okay.
I don't know how to explain it.
Yeah.
Obviously not my thing. But the whole page has like 30,000 sonographers. Again, I don't even know how I'm describing this, but they're all in pain. It's a
Wow.
group for
They're always
people that
bent
do
over.
ultrasound type things that
Huh.
are all in pain, and all of them have nowhere to go.
Oh,
And
wow.
it's their livelihood, so they can't leave their job but they're like bending over and doing this, and if a patient's overweight, they have to push harder, so their hurt shoulder, it hurts even,
Yeah, no
the whole
kidding.
world of it. And I'm like, I could literally make a whole another business just
Yeah,
for this
absolutely.
Facebook group.
We can help you.
Yeah, but it's like,
You
okay,
don't
but I
have to hurt.
can't, but I could. And so anyway, so you have a platform in this moment. What thoughts do you have for them? How do they get through it? What's your coaching?
So you were asking me about movement professionals who are in pain and how they help people with pain,
How
right?
Yeah,
So one
yeah.
of the
How do
things,
you, yeah,
yeah.
survive, or what,
Yeah.
I don't know,
One of the things that I wish I had
progress.
known 20 years ago is to put my ego aside. And when I have an injury or a sore, whatever, I'm sure you've done it. We then tend to teach with our good side, or we only do the exercise we can do well because we don't want them to see that we're injured. We are doing such a disservice to them and to ourselves. If you have something that isn't perfect in your body, show that to your clients, because so often they are judging themselves for not being able to do it perfect like the teacher's doing it. We are all human. We all get injured. We all have our restrictions, all the things. Show your that you're fallible. So for example, if you're a teacher and you broke your foot, go teach. Keep teaching and show people you can still do a full class, modify a few things, and get so much out of it. Or if you've got a shoulder issue, don't just show things on the other side. Show them that, okay, I can't bring my arm all the way up here, but look at all the other things I can still do in this class. So, first of all, it shows people that they don't have to be perfect. And it's giving them a real life example of, I can still show up to this class and do a lot of things, even though I've got this big restriction. So, that's one thing. Second thing, I think it's really important to get away from being too prescriptive with our exercises and allowing people to play and experiment and be curious and figure out what works for them. We can guide them, of course, But a big part of when people are in pain is that their system is overprotective. And the story most people have on a loop is that movement is scary and going to make things worse. So just prescribing exercise, even though it might be the perfect exercise on paper, if that person is feeling nervous to do it because they think it's going to make them worse, it's never going to work for them. So instead, figure out who they are, what they like, what they enjoy, and find ways to move. So work with what's working is part of it, but find ways to move that feel delicious, even if it has nothing to do with their injury, because by showing, if we prove to the nervous system that movement can feel good, it decreases the protection and it wants to move more. It will let you move more. Whereas if you keep bullying and saying, well, they've got a knee problem, I got to give them squats, but squats hurt, but you've got to do those squats, but squats hurt. Every time you do the squats, your system's getting more and more protective. They're going to feel worse and worse as you go on because you're not hearing the message that I don't want to do squats right now. So less prescriptive, more who is the person in front of me that I'm working with, listen to them, hear what their needs are, not just their needs, but what do they love? Like what makes them happy, what gives them joy, and bring that into their bodies and prove to their system that movement feels good, because that opens the door to all the other stuff that's maybe going to be more directed towards their injury.
That's so awesome.
Hmm.
That's so awesome. I think very, very useful. I think people are really going to resonate with your message.
I hope so.
And so to wrap up, what is one thing you would say to yourself, your younger self, right? What would you say to yourself in your lowest point?
In my lowest point, I don't get low. I'm like one of those annoyingly positive people. So I don't get low much, to be honest. I always think that there's something better coming. But the thing that holds me back is my shyness. I can get up and do this. I can speak in front of hundreds of people, no problem. But like for example, I could be at a conference and be a speaker, no problem on stage, and then it comes to lunch, and now I have to sit and chat next to people at lunch. I'm like terrified. So I've missed opportunities sometimes to introduce myself to someone that maybe we would have collaborated together or something, because I'm so shy. So even just sending you that email, Missy, was ridiculous how much it took for me to do that. Had you been a full-on stranger, wouldn't have been a problem. But because we kind of had a connection, sort of, but not really, I was like, oh, should I, shouldn't I? It was ridiculous. So I usually push through it, but there definitely have been times where I haven't, and I'm sure I missed out on opportunities because of it. So not to let that shyness hold me back.
Okay, so that's what you would say is
Yeah.
don't let that shyness
Yeah.
hold you back.
Yeah. Take
So
the,
what's the opposite of that? So what would you say? You would
like,
say
go and say hello. It's such a simple thing. It's such a small
go
thing,
say
but
hello?
literally going say hello and introduce myself to somebody is like I get paralyzed.
Yeah,
Like
I
if we
get
were
that.
somewhere in person and I saw you and I know who you are, for me to go up and say hi, it would be like my insides would be like ridiculous. So I have often pushed myself to do it, but I've often not as well. So
Yeah.
to just
That's your signal of
yeah.
like,
Oh yeah,
hello.
my body tells
That's
me for sure.
be curious. Tell me more
Hmm.
about that. That's so great. Oh, thank you so much for contributing to
Thank
my
you.
audience and
I
to
love what
me
you're
and
doing, Missy. I really
how
do.
this is what I love about a podcast. Thank you. Is someone can hear this and share it with someone else and share it with someone else and truly change the world. Like it can change someone's entire relationship with themselves or
Yeah.
oh my gosh, I'm not alone. I also don't like to say hello to people. I'm super shy. There's someone else out there who runs a whole business and can speak in front of 10,000 people, no problem. Just that feeling of not being alone because that's
Yeah.
another thing in our industry is it's so I think lonely because people are paying us to hang out with them all day every day. And sometimes, when I used to take all the clients I could in a day and I'd have like 8 to 10 clients, I'd get home and be like not fulfilled because
Mm,
I felt lonelier
right.
because it was such a one way. I don't know, it was just such a weird experience. So um I'm so grateful for the connection and the
Me too.
contribution that you gave us today. So, how can we find you and learn about your offerings?
So I have lots of free stuff because I really want people to know how to help themselves. So underscore stillness in motion on Instagram, stillness in motion with Colleen Jorgensen on YouTube. ColleenJorgensen.org is my website. Facebook is also stillness in motion. And I have some free bundles that I'm happy to share. I can give you the link, Missy, if you want to put it in the show notes. And my
Sure.
program that I'm so proud of is Dare to Heal. And we'll be starting a new session soon. I don't have the date, but I will get that information to you as soon as I do have a date. But people can go on a waiting list and I'll let them know as soon as we're running the next session. It's 12 weeks. And honestly, it's life changing. It really is. I'm so proud of it.
That's
Mhm.
so amazing. I love to hear that. I'm so proud of
I'm
it. I
so proud of it.
love, oh,
You know,
that's
like when you build something and you think it's going to do XYZ and then it did more than you anticipated. And I'm so optimistic that what I hoped it would do was a lot. And I've seen even more and I just couldn't be happier about it.
okay. That's so awesome.
Oh,
So,
and I want to tell
stillness in
you,
motion. Okay.
sorry,
Yeah.
I just want to tell you that. So in my program, every week they get different things that open, like breath, mindfulness, movement, da da da. And I'm adding functional neurology thanks to you as a new component that they're going to get every week. So that's going to
Oh,
be for the
that's
first time. The next launch is going to include the functional neuro stuff. So thank you very much because it is such a nice complement to what we already do.
Oh, you're so welcome. That is music to my ears. That's
Yes,
what it's meant for. From my perspective, it's a compliment to
totally.
your expertise. So it's just so amazing. I mean, that's my favorite part is seeing what people do with the material.
Yeah, me too.
It blows my mind
And
what
I
people
appreciate
have
that
come
about
up with.
you. Because some people who share, they like to guard their stuff, and I'm not like that at all either. I'm like you, take it, and then I love to learn from what you've done with it. So I appreciate that you're like that as well. Thank you for that.
Yeah. And that comes from experience, right? Of being in a situation where like you can't use this, you can't teach
Yeah,
it, you can't and I'm like,
I don't
what
get
why
it.
am I learning it then?
We're trying to help
Why am I
people.
why am I paying to learn it if I'm not allowed to teach it? I'm so confused or
But also,
like it just
why are you developing something that helps people and not letting it get spread? I don't get that mentality. It's
it's so bizarre. It's so bizarre. So, thank you so much for being on the show. I appreciate you and I will see you soon.
see you soon. Thanks, Missy.
Thanks, Colleen.